Part 16 Agreement Conditions for the Exchange with My Health and the Last Royal Family of the Qing Dynasty. A dripping light rain hit the ground, and after the rain became heavier. There were also rainwater drips on the eaves, hitting the stone steps, making a tinkling sound. There is less rain this year, and it is hard to have this rain, looking at this day. It will rain overnight, so that the farmers can finally take a breath. Exactly. However, less rain also has the advantage of less rain. Do you see how sweet the taste of this melon and fruit is this year? I just remember that it was the year before last, and the rain was called a lot, but the melons and fruits were tasteless. And I also asked people on purpose, saying that it was to let the rain penetrate, although the moisture was enough. The taste was light. Furong and Honglian each carried a plate of fruit, walked in from the outer room with a smile, and saw Pu Qiutai sitting on the window couch. The two put the fruit on the table. Honglian smiled and said, "Although it is summer, but this rainy weather is also cool. The young master is not in good health, so don't sit in front of the window." Furong smiled and said, "It's okay. Our young master is a genius. And he likes this rain and snow the most, so wouldn't it be enough to cover it with a piece of clothing?" As she spoke, she stretched out her hand and took his clothes and walked over to Pu Qiutai. When she got closer, she found that Pu Qiutai was looking out of the window in a daze, with his pale face and his beautifully shaped lips gently opening and closing, as if he was saying something. Because the voice was too small, Furong didn't hear it clearly, so she got closer to listen, and listened to it for a long time, before she finally heard it. Pu Qiutai was reading 2 lines of poetry over and over again. Mountains are not mountains and water. Life is not life and death is not death. Just these 2 lines of poetry. Pu Qiutai read it over and over. Obviously the tone was flat, and there was no passionate and painful emotion in it. But it was precisely because of such a flat machine that Furong's whole person trembled in pain. What kind of desperate person, what kind of heart is like ashes, can read these 2 heart-wrenching verses in such a tone? However, they are just palace maids who come to serve, and even bear the heavy responsibility of monitoring him. What can they do in the face of his difficulties and helplessness? Furong sighed, and when she turned around, she saw that Honglian was also bending slightly behind her to listen carefully, obviously. She understood, raised her eyebrows, but she also sighed deeply, stood up and said to Furong, "Since the emperor summoned the young master for 2 consecutive nights in the spring, this call has become more and more frequent. Take this month as an example. It is not yet the middle of the month, but there are 10 nights when the young master is in the palace. What does the emperor think? Isn't the harem a concubine without a companion?" Furong looked at Pu Qiutai worriedly, gently covered the clothes in her hand on him, and whispered, "So what? Where do we have room to beak? You don't know, I'm even more worried. Now I always feel that the emperor is getting more and more inseparable from the young master, and I am afraid of it. In the end, he will become more and more domineering, and simply summon the young master into the palace." Honglian was taken aback by Furong's words, and whispered, "No. Not really, right? Does the emperor really want to force the young master to his death? This is also too unkind." The 2 were talking in a whisper, when they suddenly heard the sound of footsteps outside the door, and then the voice of the person came before entering the house. "My lord, no. Oh, no," is the voice of Shuangxi. Before the words fell, they saw Shuangxi break into the door. His whole body was wet, but his face was flushed. Seeing Pu Qiutai, this little guy had red eyes, wiped the rain on his face, and cried out, "My lord, no. Oh no. Oh, no? What's wrong?" Pu Qiutai is now living like a frightened bird, hearing the words of Shuangxi, only to feel a burst of dizziness in his head. The first reaction is that something happened to his family. In a hurry, he almost rolled off the couch, while asking in a loud voice, "You speak, who is the accident?" "Master. Slow down." Farong hurriedly helped him, turned her head to look at Shuangxi and said, "What kind of tongue are you chewing? Don't you know if the young master is not in good health? What to do if you scare him? You've been following the young master for so long, and you're still reckless." Shuangxi originally looked at a few palace maids who were not pleasing to the eye and felt that they were sent by the emperor to monitor their own adults. So they naturally had the same heart as the dog emperor. However, in the past half a year, he also knew that Farong, Honglian and others had done their best to serve Pu Qiutai. So the little mustard in his heart had already gone. Although it is like this time he can't say it in front of Honglian and the others, and he can't wait to tell but hesitate. Honglian is a straight person. Seeing him like this, she couldn't help but be annoyed, and said hatefully, "What the hell are you talking about? Are you still afraid that we won't succeed? I don't believe it, but I just went to the suburbs to visit your distant relative, and I can't tell us anything." Pu Qiutai still trusts this little guy who has been with him for a few years. Seeing that he is swallowing and refusing to speak, his heart suddenly trembled, and his mind couldn't help but think of a certain person, because he calmed down his emotions, and said to Farong and Honglian, "You guys go out first." Honglian glanced at Shuangxi hatefully, and was about to speak, but was pulled out by Farong involuntarily. Here Shuangxi walked a few steps to Pu Qiutai's side, approached him and said, "Young master, when the little one came back, I happened to see it. See. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince's family. Bye." He was escorted to Beijing. "His Royal Highness the Crown Prince?" Pu Qiutai muttered and repeated. And then his thin body stood up suddenly, grabbed Shuangxi's hand, and said in a lost voice, You mean, Prince, Your Highness." Shuangxi nodded gloomily and whispered, "So." The little one originally saw the rain, and thought about finding an inn to live in, and tomorrow entered the city, but the result was. As a result, because of this matter, the small ones couldn't take care of it, so the news came from the advanced city and the young master. Finally, this day came, and the sky was eyeless. And it was even the last bit of blood of the Daqing royal family. "Don't you stay?" Pu Qiutai clenched his chest tightly, and the fire in it was uncomfortable. In fact, in the spring of this year, he learned from Chan Yanan that the emperor had sent people to look for the prince of his homeland in the south. It is precisely because of this news that he had to endure the emperor's more and more unscrupulous demands and oppression, but the prince had no news for a day. And he couldn't help but have a fluke heart, hoping that God would bless the Daqing royal family. This last bit of blood and bones will not be extinct, even if it can only be a declare in the future. As long as there are descendants to pay tribute to the ancestors during the new year. But today, Shuangxi saw with his own eyes that the last bit of blood of the Daqing royal family was finally controlled by Xia Linxuan, according to the other party's ruthless methods. How could the prince's family escape his poisonous hands? Even if you have yourself, what are you? It's just the emperor's plaything. At this time, where would Pu Qiutai dare to think that he could influence the emperor and let him let go of the prince's family like Han Baishan? The more he thought about it, the more desperate he felt. The pain in his chest became worse and worse, and there seemed to be a stream of fishy gas surging up in his throat. He swallowed desperately, but he couldn't control it. And finally he squirted a bright red with a wow sound. A scream of Shuangxi sounded in his ears. Pu Qiutai tried hard to see his face clearly, but he couldn't see it clearly. And the hand holding the collapsed head was also soft and weak. He only felt that his body was sinking, and then he completely lost consciousness. Honglian was complaining to Farong outside. Because of the sound of rain, they couldn't hear what Shuangxi and Pu Qiutai said in the inner room, but after a while, they heard Shuangxi's exclamation, and when they ran in, what they saw was Pu Qiutai spurting out a mouthful of blood and falling on his back. Imperial Doctor, Honglian, quickly send someone to ask for Imperial Doctor. Furong's fright was not trivial. And when she came closer, she found that there was no blood on Pu Qiutai's face, and her heart sank even more. Your Majesty, Master Pu has always been weak, and now he is in a hurry. It's going to take some time to recuperate. In the Hanlin Pavilion, Lu Hongdao looked at the unconscious man on the bed, and admired His Majesty the Emperor in his heart. You can tell me that half a year ago, although Master Pu was also weak, he was still far from this level of death at any time. How did His Majesty toss people like this in just half a year? Xia Linxuan, who got the answer, was also very depressed. I didn't do anything, it's just that I can summon him a little more frequently in the past 3 months, anyway. Everyone knows about our relationship, he will enter the palace sooner or later, what are you afraid of? But how did you get to this point? Here ordered Furong to go out and talk to Lu Hongdao about the prescription. Xia Linxuan looked at Shuangxi who was kneeling on the ground, and said viciously, if you don't want to enter the Chunyi Guard and be tortured, you can honestly explain to me, why did your master become like this? What did you say in front of him? Shuangxi also knew that if he didn't speak at this time, it would be a dead end, not to mention that it was not something that needed to be kept secret. The prince's family was arrested, and it was not the handiwork of the person in front of him, because he honestly confessed. Xia Linxuan then understood why Pu Qiutai suddenly fainted. Kicked Shuangxi out, he looked at the man on the bed carefully, but it was only half a year. And the little face that was already the size of a palm was even thinner and didn't even have a single or 2 pieces of meat. He gently stroked Pu Qiutai's eyebrows. And he didn't know what it was like in his heart. Your Majesty, are you summoning the young master too often these days? Honglian couldn't help it beside her, ignoring Yulan's glances. She simply said what was in her heart, you know that the young master is. He wasn't very keen on that. This afternoon, the slave maid and sister Furong entered the house and saw him half sitting on the couch. The whole person was like wood, and his mouth was turned over and over in 2 sentences. Mountains are not mountains and water. Life is not life and death is not death. Listen, what is this, Emperor? It's not that he's being cornered, and all his thoughts are desperate. And the young master is. Okay, Honglian. Yulan stopped drinking the Honglian in time, so the bold palace maid stopped talking anyway. She reported the young master's situation truthfully, and what to do in the future depends on the emperor's decision. Mountains are not mountains and water. Life is not life and death is not death. Xia Linxuan sighed, imagining that this man was sitting in front of the window. His eyes were full of desolation, and his heart was full of despair. I don't want to force you to be so ruthless, but if I don't push you to a dead end step by step, how can you be willing to enter the palace? How can you surrender to me from your heart? Did you know that when I almost lost you that day, I couldn't control my emotions and was on the verge of a crazy breakdown? Xia Linxuan smiled bitterly and muttered to himself. And finally he sighed, looked at Pu Qiutai worriedly, thinking that he would force him later. Even this cruel king couldn't bear it. When Pu Qiutai woke up, it was already dark. The summer days are long, and usually at this time, the sky is still bright, but because it is raining today, it is almost dusk, and the sky is already frighteningly dark. There were no candles in the room. He got up with difficulty, only to feel that his throat was dry, and just about to call Yulan or Furong to pour him a glass of water. He sensitively noticed a long breath that seemed to be there. His heart jumped, and his eyes widened quickly. And sure enough, in front of his bed, there was a figure sitting. In the dark, the man's face was not clear, but that figure, how many times the naked body was entangled, for Pu Qiutai, it was no longer unforgettable. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Your Majesty." Although he was horrified, he still wanted to get out of bed and perform the courtesy of a monarch as soon as possible. You don't want to watch Zhu Mingtang's family die tragically. So you can take care of your body. Within a month, I want you to grow 5 caddies of flesh, and I also need the imperial doctor to diagnose it personally, unless your body improves, otherwise. I will let you watch the last bit of blood and bone of the royal family of the Qing dynasty disappear with your own eyes. The cold voice, without a trace of temperature. Pu Qiutai couldn't see what expression Xia Linxuan had on his face, and he didn't dare to imagine how much care and sincerity belonged to this high god king after these words, so he was stunned. And in the face of Xia Linxuan's words, he didn't react. What? Don't want to make this deal with me? Suddenly, hearing Xia Linxuan's voice sound again, Pu Qiutai shivered excitedly. And he couldn't think about it anymore. He climbed out of bed as fast as he could, knelt beside Xia Linxuan, and said in a trembling voice, "Minister. Thank you, Your Majesty. Long live." "Don't thank you so early. Don't forget, whether their family is dead or alive depends on whether you can agree to my conditions." Xia Linxuan stood up, reached out to pick up Pu Qiutai, put him back on the bed, covered him with the thin blanket with his own hands, and said softly, "This month, I will not call you again. I Qing will take good care of your body. I am waiting for you to exchange the results that satisfy me for the life of that family." After he finished speaking, he tucked the corners of the quilt for Pu Qiutai, separated by such a close distance. Even if the light was dim, he could still feel the slight tremor of the body under the thin quilt. Xia Linxuan's heart was sour, but he still couldn't help but kiss Pu Qiutai lightly on the face, and then he stood up and left without looking back. It wasn't until half a quarter of an hour later that Pu Qiutai was sure that the terrible tyrant was gone, really gone. However, although Xia Linxuan was gone, his words remained in Pu Qiutai's heart, and after being stunned for a moment, the thin man sat up suddenly, and shouted in a trembling voice, "Farong, Magnolia, give it to me. I'm going to eat. What other supplements do I have in the kitchen? I'm going to make up for it." Before the words fell, 2 figures hurriedly came in from outside the door, went straight to the candlestick, and lit a few Butter's giant candles. "Young master, don't worry, the emperor has already ordered it just now, and everyone else is busy in the kitchen at this time. Those cooks are still good at cooking. If it is a stewed tonic, it is better at green willow and osmanthus." Xiangtao smiled and walked over, picked up a light luo cloak from the hanger, put it on for Pu Qiutai, and said with a smile, "Although it is summer, it is raining today, and the wind is blowing again in the evening. The young master is weak, it is better to be careful. You haven't seen how ugly the emperor's face was when he just arrived." Pu Qiutai nodded, stood up and looked at Farong and said, "When did the emperor come?" "I just fainted a little unwell for a while." "Why did you go and alarm the Holy Majesty?" Farong sighed and said, "Young master, don't just talk about us. And don't look at what you were like at that time." Vomited a mouthful of blood and fainted again. The slaves and maids were cold at that time. If they dared to hide it from the emperor, they didn't have to wait for the emperor to come and cut off our heads. We might be able to suffer less if we were killed by ourselves. Pu Qiutai smiled bitterly. "It's me who is useless. But you are guilty." Xiangtao smiled. "Young master, don't say such things. As long as you get better quickly, don't say that this is a little frightened, no matter how big the crime. We are willing to bear it." Just when the emperor was leaving, he also said that from now on you will make up for it. The slave and maid are still skeptical. And now after listening to the young master's words, it is really the case, in the end, the emperor understands the young master. Pu Qiutai's face froze, and he sighed and didn't speak again. In addition to a bowl of stewed shark fin soup, there is also a bowl of steamed bird's nest with rock sugar. And the main course is also rich porridge and mountain seafood and other nourishing products. Although in the face of these things, Pu Qiutai really didn't have much appetite. But he forced himself to eat it for the first time. The life of the prince's family was tied to these supplements, as long as he could grow 5 caddies of meat and let his body recover again. The last bit of blood of the royal family of the Qing dynasty might be retained. Of course, Pu Qiutai also knew that Xia Linxuan could completely go back on his word or use the lives of this family to repeatedly threaten him again and again. It's just that he doesn't have the strength to think about these things in the future. He just wants to try his best to complete the conditions asked by Xia Linxuan now. Emperor Jing Ren is dead. This is his only chance to repay the other party's kindness. Yes, he was very tired, too tired, physically and mentally exhausted, so tired that he no longer had the strength to think about it. So he could only stay up like this, step by step.